Hi everyone and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today we are looking at Corlys Velaryon, one of the central figures of the entirety, I think, of the Targaryen rule in Westeros. And also one of the central figures in the Dance of the Dragons and one of the potential spin-offs that we have for Game of Thrones. So a big and important character. He's somewhere up here in terms of the casting that we've got for House of the Dragon. But I always try and do a little update first on what's going on in the wider world of TV, film, fantasy. Not much has happened this week is the short answer. There was one picture we got from the Lord of the Rings of Power, which I have thoughts on. It's one of the new characters holding a black sword. No real context is given to it, but I have some thoughts. If you're interested in my thoughts, I will probably put them on Twitter tomorrow or the day after. There's a lot there potentially, but we don't have any of the information. But today I just really want to focus in on Corlys Velaryon. Corlys is one of the huge characters that we've got here, and I'll come to questions that I've got from my patrons. I will try and pick up as many questions as I can in the chat as we're going through, but I thought it's worth just giving a bit of an overview about the character and who he is and what his history is before we get into some of the specifics. So Corlys Velaryon was born in the year 53 AC, so the 53rd year after Aegon's invasion. And he was born into House Velaryon. House Velaryon is a Valyrian house, not one of the top tier Valyrian houses like the Dragon Riders, like House Targaryen, but a Valyrian house nonetheless. They lived on Driftmark there in the mouth of the Gullet for, we don't know exactly how long, but earlier than the Targaryens arrived. So they were there before the Targaryens arrived. And they obviously formed an alliance quite swiftly with the Targaryens. And once the Doom of Valyria happened, they were left alone. House Celtigar as well. But as remnants of the Valyrian freehold, they were alone. So the Targaryens and the Velaryons often intermarried. The Targaryen preference was to marry in amongst themselves, obviously, but sometimes that wasn't possible. So second preference was generally House Velaryon. When we get to 53 AC, we get the birth of Corlys Velaryon. House Velaryon is one of the central houses in the politics of the Seven Kingdoms. When we think about things in the perspective of Game of Thrones, we often think, who are the big and important houses? Well, yes, there was House Targaryen, but then there was like the Lannisters, the Tyrells, people like that, House Stark. When you read through Fire and Blood, through that period, the three big houses are House Baratheon, House Velaryon, and House Hightower. Those are the three big houses underneath the Targaryens. House Velaryon was always big and important. They generally, whereas the Targaryens ruled the skies with the dragons, they left the seas to the Velaryons. House Velaryon provided the boats that allowed the Targaryen forces to come across in the original invasion. That was their role. And broadly speaking, it wasn't always the case, but broadly speaking, Master of Ships in the small council was a Velaryon role. The Royal Navy was basically the Velaryon Navy. This was an important house. That's what Corlys was born into. He, as a very young boy, became a sailor. At 6 years old, he was already out on boats, on voyages. By the age of 16, he was a captain. He was sailing ships on his own. Within a few years, he was sailing ships all the way around Westeros. And this just grew from being something that he just did with other ships, sailing, doing a little bit of merchant work, to some epic voyages. 9 voyages is what we're told. 9 amazing voyages, greater than anything that anyone else had done or will do in the future, with a couple of exceptions perhaps we'll come on to in a moment, but 9 voyages. Now, we don't know the details of all of these voyages. We know about the first, second, third and 9th voyages. The others we do not know. We're not told about the details of them, but we're told that they were amazing and they were epic and they were the stuff of legend. So voyage number 1 was out to Karth and beyond. Voyage number 2 all the way over to Ashai. Voyage number 3 the other side, the north side of Essos, into the Shivering Sea. Voyage number 9, his greatest voyage, he took a ship over to Ashai and he bought stuff. He bought things. He bought 20 ships. He filled them with spices and silks and precious jewels and elephants. And he sailed these 20 ships home. 14 of them survived the voyage. And those ships, the bounty that they brought with them was so huge that they, once he sold it, they immediately leapfrogged the other houses, the Lannisters, the Hightowers, to become the richest house in Westeros. They weren't just the greatest sailing nation over there in the sort of the mainland of Westeros, but they were also the richest now. Corlys Velaryon, having taken over the leadership of House Velaryon, he shifted the castle. The castle was a little bit dank, a little bit wet. He created an entirely new city, a town for his great castle, the seat of House Velaryon, Spice Town it became called. This was the great trading port. This is where they cornered the market in all trade coming into what would otherwise have gone into Duskendale or King's Landing. It stopped off at Spice Town. Hull, this extra city, was growing up alongside it. This is where the ships were built. Suddenly, Driftmark, this island which used to be like just there as almost like an also ran, it became very, very important. So that's where he was at the point a bit before the Dance of the Dragons. And what does a member of House Velaryon wish to do when they are important and powerful? They wish to cement that by marrying into the Targaryens. He married Rhaenys Targaryen, the queen who never was. Now, we will see both of them in House of the Dragon. But basically, what happens after that is 3-4 times they get snubbed. They get snubbed in terms of getting closer to the crown. The queen who never was the queen who never was because Jaehaerys, her father, overlooked her for the throne. Then we get her son Laenor, who, when we get to the Great Council of 101, who's going to succeed Jaehaerys? Maybe Laenor, maybe Rhaenys herself, maybe Rhaenor should inherit. No, not at all. Actually, we're going to go with Rhaenyra. Okay, well, what happens next? Maybe we should sort of marry in. Maybe when the king himself, the Viserys, maybe when his wife dies, maybe we should marry him to Laena, the other daughter of Corlys and Rhaenys. No, that doesn't happen. Again and again and again, they get, from their perspective, snubbed by House Targaryen. They are left out there, but eventually they manage to claw themselves back, as they see it, back into the line of succession. Laenor marries Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra, who is the heir to the throne, and they have some children. They have 3 boys. This is very exciting news. Now, the rumors start to spread that perhaps these actually aren't Laena's children. This is the children of Rhaenyra with Harwin strong. It's a rumor, but it's a rumor that seems quite likely. Laenor, as far as we can tell, was gay. So that seems to be what was going on. The Dance of the Dragons breaks out. The Aegon II, Alicent, the High Towers, they launch a coup. Rhaenyra, Rhaenys, Corlys, Daemon, who's now married Rhaenyra, they are all on one side. The Blacks, what are they going to do? Well, Rhaenys, Corlys's wife, dies quite early on in the dance, but Corlys remains a central part of the court of Rhaenyra pretty much all the way through this. He very rarely comes to the fore, but he's an incredibly important and influential figure throughout this period. And by the time, it's probably worth noting that by the time of the Dance of the Dragons, he's 73. He's lived a full life. He is a legend. Wherever he goes, people just go, wow, this is the sea snake. This is Corlys Velaryon. This is the man who's traveled further than anyone else has ever gone. He is a legend in his own lifetime. So he acts as Hand of the King to Rhaenyra. When Rhaenyra takes the throne, as she does partway through the Dance of the Dragons, Corlys comes across. An intriguing subplot within this is the fact that the dragon seeds, when the Blacks call on the dragon seeds, they say anyone who has got some Valyrian blood in them, they can come forth and try to ride a dragon and join the team. And two people from Driftmark, Adam and Alyn of Hull, both try. Adam does indeed become a dragon rider. Alyn tries, but although he survives the Dance of the Dragons and has a long and storied history afterwards, he doesn't actually get to be a dragon rider. But we get these two who Corlys claims, perhaps we'll come back to this, but Corlys claims they are Laenor's sons, illegitimate children. The rumor is, though, perhaps they're actually Corlys's. When Rhaenyra starts to go off the rails a little bit, we get the two dragon seeds who turn cloaks, basically, and she turns on the other dragon seeds, Adam Velaryon and Nettles. Corlys says, no, I'm not having any of this. He defends his own grandson/son, and for that, Rhaenyra slams into the Black Cells. He's then there for a little while until he's released during this really quite confusing period in King's Landing, which I'm very much looking forward to on the TV show whenever they get there. He gets released by Sir Perkin the Flea, who is an intriguing sort of character, but after Rhaenyra has gone, and he survives. He survives the Dance of the Dragons. He works his way through to the other side, always at this stage trying to get peace through diplomacy. It's an intriguing character shift from somebody who was initially all out for exploring, sailing, being quite gung-ho. Suddenly he's the person trying to come up with diplomatic solutions, how to end this war, and eventually it works. It's a lot of his work that leads to the situation that gets this kind of tentative peace and the regency of Aegon III, which is what takes us through past the end of the Dance of the Dragons. He is one of the regents of Aegon III, and then eventually he dies, apparently of old age at 79. So that's his story. The man is, as I say, a legend within Westeros. People are looking to him all the way through this for his guidance, for his wisdom, and for inspiration from him. And there are lots of stories that are not told about him. What we have in Fire and Blood is the story of the Targaryens. It's not the story of the Velaryons. So We have a spin-off show, we're told, called 9 Voyages, which may or may not get the go-ahead, but it's certainly been in the works now for at least a year, if not a couple of years. And that is one of these shows that will have a slightly different feel to Game of Thrones. It would be very seafaring. The title implies that this is earlier on in Corlys's lifetime, him exploring the world. It will give us the chance not just to see some places that we've heard about, like Karth and Ashai, but some places that we've just never been to at all, either on the show or in the books. We simply do not know where those other voyages went. As I say, we know 4 of the 9 voyages. The other 5, we do not know where he went. So that will be really fun if that happens. It will give an opportunity for a lot of world building, and it's probably fair to say we've not got huge amounts of material to build on, but I think in many ways that might be a good thing. It will allow a lot of, if George R. R. Martin's on board with this, it will allow a lot of extra world building. Okay, let's go and see a few questions in the chat. Roman Lakovets, thank you very much. Bit off topic, saying, could you someday invite Elio Garcia to your channel to discuss the Pink Letter? He believes Ramsay wrote it while you think it's Mance. It would be interesting to hear both of your arguments. Yeah, so the Pink Letter, for those who do not know, this is quite late on in the day in the story we've got in the Song of Ice and Fire. This is the letter that actually leads to, indirectly, it leads to Jon's death, because Jon gets this letter, which is basically hurling abuse at him and deliberately coaxing him to come and attack Winterfell. And he goes with it, and he says, that's it, I'm giving up my calling to the wall, I'm going to go down to Winterfell, who's with me? And the members of the Night's Watch who are against this kind of thing kill him. So it's an important letter. The question is, who wrote it? I didn't know Elio was thinking that this was Ramsay who wrote it. I think that there's some pretty strong evidence that it wasn't. I think in particular the focus of the letter being so much on Mance does seem to imply Mance, or someone who knows about Mance. I mean, I don't think Ramsay would care two hoots about Mance Rayder, in my view, but it would be interesting to hear why Elio thinks that. So, that would be a good idea. Thank you very much for that. Had Mara Lee saying, just a show of love and appreciation for all the fabulous stories on the Well Told Tale, especially on Patreon. Here's to your gorgeous dog, Dan. Thank you, Robert. You're the best. Thank you, Mara. I hugely appreciate you, your generosity and your kindness, not just to me, to the whole community. I very much appreciate that. Thank you. You did have some questions on Patreon. I tried to bundle the answers to that up in my intro, so hopefully that's answered all of them. Do let me know if there is anything that I did not cover. Let's have a quick check through. Let's go to a question from my patrons then, to start with. Diego Godoy saying, hola Robert, hola, saying, I'm very excited to see another House of the Dragon live stream. What do you make of the version the father of Adam and Alyn Velaryon was Laenor? Do you think our headcanon should be that their real father was Corlys? Thank you. I think the answer to that is yes. So as I say, it's pretty clear that Laenor was gay. There's no that doesn't appear to be a word which is in the Maester's vocabulary. They don't like to say these things. They're very prudish. But it's pretty clear that Laenor didn't fancy women. He clearly was very close to men and didn't spend much time at all with Rhaenyra. So the idea that he spent his time going down to the docks and finding women to sleep with. It's possible, but it doesn't seem likely. So could it have been Corlys? Well, this is one of those occasions where when you read Fire and Blood, Archmaester Gildane is the person who wrote Fire and Blood, and he has these various sources that he calls on at various points. And most of the time, he's very clear with one of his sources that he doesn't really value it. He doesn't think it's particularly useful. He thinks it's pretty scurrilous, but it's interesting for added flavor. This is Mushroom's account. But on this occasion, he says, you know what? I think Mushroom's right. I think actually it makes a whole lot more sense that Adam and Alyn of Hull were Corlys's children. Why is that? Well, firstly, Corlys did spend a huge amount of time in Hull. He spent a huge amount of time with the ships, so he was there, which is where their mother was. And he did seem to sort of ignore them, not acknowledge them, until his wife, Rhaenys, was dead. And then suddenly he's completely, hey, look at these guys here. These are my son's children. We really should get them on board. And he's straight away not just saying, okay, why don't we see whether they can ride dragons for the good of the cause, but also he's legitimizing them straight away. He's saying these are now, they're not just like bastard children, these are true Valyrians. They're from House Velaryon. He made them part of the succession. He had to be 100% certain. He was a very proud man. He would have had to be 100% certain that they were indeed from House Velaryon. Yes, they looked like it. Yes, at least one of them became a dragon rider, but he had to be 100% certain because he was saying these people, these are going to inherit from me. So that implies for me that yes, he knew who they were. Should it be our headcanon? I think so. I think that's the most logical solution to what's going on there. Could they be another dragon seed, somebody else's? Well, possibly, but that doesn't explain Corlys's enthusiasm for legitimizing them. And could they be Laenor's? Well, possibly, but probably not, given what we know about him. The most likely solution is that they are, in fact, Corlys's. Let's just have a quick through the chat. Canadian Fantasy Corner saying, really hope we get to see how Aemond lost his eye. Yeah, I think we will see that. I think we'll see that in season 1. Carl Carsnock saying Mushroom is always right. I don't know if he's always right, but he's certainly right a lot more than Gildane seems to suggest he is. Reflective Rambling saying, wasn't this week originally supposed to be a Lord of the Rings stream? Am I imagining that? No, you're not imagining that. So quick, rather cryptic announcement. There will not be a live stream next week for good reasons. Normally it's because I'm taking a week off for a little bit of a relax, but there's something else that I can't talk about at the moment. I'll be back the week afterwards when hopefully I will be able to say a little bit more. But that's the situation. So I've changed things around. So I thought people have been asking for a live stream about Corlys. So I thought I'd do a live stream about Corlys, and I will talk about the Rings of Power in 2 weeks' time, which will be something to look forward to. I will try and get somebody else on for that as well. And what I try to do with my Lord of the Rings streams is there are so many fantastic content creators in the Lord of the Rings world. I'd love to introduce you to. So I'll try and get somebody else new on there. Carl Carstnack saying mushroom is mostly always right. Usually, yes, absolutely. That's exactly. Agree with saying name one thing mushroom is proven wrong about. Well, I can't prove anything wrong. Maybe he is right about everything. Who knows? But there's. I think it's probably fair to say that there are some things that Mushroom loves the salacious, and he loves the fun stories, and some of them do sound just a little bit too exciting and exotic to be true. But on this one, I think we should add weight to the fact that even Gildane seems to think that this one's true. Matt Savino saying Robert is Quaith confirmed. I mean, okay, I will take that. There are worse people to be compared to. Sam Day, good morning from Australia. I hope you're well. Thank you, I am. I was wondering if there are any Velaryon and Targaryen marriages other than the ones we will see in House of the Dragon. Thanks and best wishes. Yeah, there are quite a few. The keyword, there were a couple before the invasion, before we get to Aegon's invasion. So there were a couple of intermarriages with the Velaryons at that point, and then there were also one or two afterwards. None are, I would personally argue, as significant as the one between Rhaenys and Corlys. That is the one that shifted the balance of power in Westeros. What we suddenly had was you get pretty much half of the power of Team Black to start with came from the Velaryons. This wasn't Rhaenyra in and of herself did not have the troops. They were not based in King's Landing. They could not call on the Gold Cloaks. They couldn't call on any of the core supporters around that area. The biggest houses outside of that, House Hightower, House Lannister, they couldn't call on. So initially, really, the 50% of what their strength was House Velaryon. So Corlys was absolutely vital to this. I don't think it's exaggerating to say that if Corlys had been on the other side at the very beginning, then the Blacks wouldn't have stood a chance. Yes, they had Daemon, but the weight of House Velaryon at that time should not be underestimated. The real YT saying, I have a drinking glass just like you. Well, it's a fine drinking glass. I wish everyone had them there. Excellent. Andrew K saying, from Aegon I's mother, Aenys' wife, through to Aegon III's second wife, the Velaryons were super interconnected to the early Targ dynasty. They were absolutely. So it's worth just saying again. So the Targaryens, if they could, would marry another Targaryen. This is all the way through to probably, yes, we have some intermarriage with other families, but all the way through to probably about Aegon IV-ish. The rule was, if you could marry a Targaryen, marry a Targaryen. If you can't marry a Targaryen, marry a Velaryon. If you can't marry a Velaryon, then ideally you should marry somebody else from Valyrian descent from elsewhere. If you can't do that, then maybe marry one of the other big houses. House Baratheon being probably your next best bet, because they had some Valyrian ancestry in there. So that seemed to be the order of things. It's only later on that things got a little bit more mixed up there. But generally speaking, no, that House Velaryon were the second option for marriage for the Targaryens. Timothy W saying, hi, Robert, if Adamus Corlys, do you think that that puts into doubt anything we may know about who can ride dragons? Corlys isn't the child of a Targaryen nor Adam, so he'd have almost no blood of the dragon. Well, so they are Valyrian. I think what the Dragon Seeds moment told us something which was quite important about this, which is that it's not, you don't have to have pure Valyrian blood. You don't have to be pure Targaryen. You don't have to be pure Dragon Rider. And that works all the way through to Daenerys, incidentally. If you look at Daenerys' ancestry, she's actually only at most 1/8 Targaryen. When you sort of go up through the ancestry of who she is, the intermarriage with other families is such that it's probably less than that. It's maybe 10% pure Targaryen. So you do not have to be pure Targaryen in order to be riding a dragon. So House Velaryon seems to be sort of second best, but House Velaryon were descended from, Corlys was a couple of generations ago descended from a Targaryen, so there was certainly some dragon riding blood in there. What we have is every one of the dragon seeds was at least one generation removed from being a Targaryen. Now, that taught us, therefore, that you don't, as I say, you don't have to be a pure Targaryen in order to do this. And I don't think that's changed through this story. When you say he'd have almost no blood of the dragon, this is the situation. George R. R. Martin plays with this a bit, which perhaps is why it sometimes confuses us, because you get Quentin Martell, who in Dance with Dragons, the last book, he's there, he tries to tame a dragon, and he sort of keeps on telling himself, you know what, I am part Targaryen, I am part Targaryen. I think it's his grandparent, one of his grandmothers was Targaryen. That's why it will be okay. It seems that that's not the most important thing. It's more to do with the way you do this. It's more to do with Nettles, for example, seem to have managed to ride Sheepstealer, to tame Sheepstealer, if that's the right word, by feeding it sheep, just slowly befriending it and then becoming the dragon rider. And that seems to be a lot more important. The people who just charged in and tried to hop on the back of a dragon and fly away, often that doesn't work well. Some Targaryens seem to get away with that, but more often than not, those Targaryens they've had the dragon egg, which was put into their cradle at birth, and then it hatches, and so they've known that dragon since birth. But it's more to do with how do you go about creating this bond with the dragon, more to do with that than it is to do with how much of your ancestry is pure Targaryen. Carl Karsnark reminding people, thank you very much, that I'm simul streaming, one of my favorite words, over on Twitch. If you find it easier to watch on Twitch, do please go and check that out. Ron Stoppable saying, I've heard the quote that said that Lyanna is more Stark than Rhaegar was Targaryen and his parents were siblings. Yeah, that's probably true, actually, is that, she's probably 50% Stark. Rhaegar's parents, as you say, were siblings, but when you go back, Rhaegar, like Daenerys, probably only at best 1/8 Targaryen. Question from Johnny Targs. Hello, Robert. Shout out to you for all the amazing content, as well as your moderators. Yes, if you're watching this live, please do go into the chat and give a little bit of love to the moderators. They are amazing. So please go and do that. My question in regards to Corlys Velaryon is, did the Blacks even try to coax any other Velaryons, if not Corlys himself, to help in the preamble to the dance? The Blacks, it has to be said, they were caught by surprise by the Dance of the Dragons. They I say they absented themselves. They took themselves away from King's Landing. They were almost sent away by Viserys, who was wanting to keep the two sides apart just to make his life easy. And so they were off in Dragonstone, Team Black, and so they didn't really see the dance coming. When Viserys died, they kind of seemed to assume that because he'd said that the person who would be inheriting would be Rhaenyra, then Rhaenyra would inherit. And yes, they knew that the Greens were there and that they had aspirations, but they didn't seem to really take it seriously enough to have a good spy network going on in King's Landing, keeping an eye on things. They didn't have a plan for when they heard what had happened. They didn't know what to do. They had to come together into a big council and decide what to do. They were not prepared for this. When you say, did the Blacks try to coax other Velaryons to help in the preamble of the dance? No, not in terms of, they had House Velaryon on side, but they were just la 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 la. It's a curious situation in that all of Team Black, although they had huge contacts in King's Landing, they almost weren't expecting it, and it is odd because they all seem quite clever people. They all seem quite switched on people. Daemon had his contacts there in King's Landing, in Flea Bottom, that he used the moment the war was declared. He used them really, really strongly and really, really well. Rhaenyra still had her supporters there. Corlys had a lot of people who respected him, but they were just caught unawares. They didn't know what was going. The Blacks did not expect a war, is the short version of this. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say, other than the fact that this is just very, very short-sighted of them, given the fact that we have every single generation of Targaryens has a succession crisis. It's up to that point, every single time you had, after Aegon, who was going to take over, you get Maegor took over by force, Jaehaerys took over by force, then obviously you had the Dance of the Dragons. Every single generation, it's not the person you expect to inherit who really inherits. There's always something going wrong. So they should not have been surprised by this, but they seem to have been. Cloaked One saying la 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 la, Roberts 2022. Yeah, absolutely. That's my take. Let's go to a question. Aegon the Fifth has entered the chat. Not entirely sure what that is. Somebody just said Aegon the Fifth has entered the chat, but no idea who that is. Let's go to a question from James Horner. Hello, Robert. Love your videos. My question is, do you think Corlys knew who killed his son and dealt with them himself quietly? My thinking behind this is that he did not even seem to raise any objections when Daemon married Rhaenyra. Given the type of man Daemon was and how quickly the marriage happened, it all looked very suspicious, yet the sea snake did nothing. Okay, so this is curious, but what happened with Laenor was one of several tragedies, accidents that happened in a very short space of time. Laena died in childbirth. She was married to Daemon Targaryen. Laenor died in a duel, and the person who killed him immediately rushed to a boat and escaped away. Basically, a spurned lover. Then Harwin Strong and his father died in a mysterious fire at Harrenhal. Now, if you assume that these three things which happened quite closely are connected, the person which seems to connect all of these is Daemon. Because what happened immediately after all of this was Daemon married Rhaenyra. Why is Daemon connecting all of this potentially? Well, in order for Daemon to marry Rhaenyra, those three things had to happen. Daemon was already married to Laena. Rhaenyra was already married to Laenor. And Rhaenyra had a lover who was Harwin. Now, she would not remarry unless, firstly, her husband was dead and her lover was dead. And she would not be able to remarry Daemon unless Daemon's wife was dead. The fact that those three people all died literally within a few months of each other immediately makes you suspect Daemon. So is Corlys here? Did he suspect anything? Did he know who killed his son? My general take is that he can't have. He can't have figured it out. He can't have known. The working assumption, which is hinted at in Fire and Blood, is that what happened was that Daemon wanted to marry Rhaenyra, and he thought, well, how do I get rid of Laenor? Well, I will pay for this person to kill Laenor and then get on a boat and escape, which is what happened. I think if Corlys had known who did it, he would have killed him. He would have made it known that he dealt with it, but he didn't. So that all seems to imply it was Daemon. The most suspicious thing, I think, is this fire that killed Harwin and his father, Lionel Strong. Yes, we get Harrenhal. There's a sort of a curse on Harrenhal. Anyone who's in charge of it will die. Okay. But this fire not just killed the person who was the lover of Rhaenyra, but also killed somebody who had called for Daemon's head, had basically said that he should be killed as a traitor just a few years earlier. So this is a killing two birds with one stone moment for Daemon. I'm pretty sure that that's what happened. I think that our when in doubt, blame Bloodraven. If you take it back 100 years before that, I think we can pretty quickly turn that when in doubt, blame Daemon. I think he was behind a huge amount of the dodgy stuff which went on during the Dance of the Dragons and before the Dance of the Dragons. Question from 444. Corlys of Velaryon is maybe my favorite secondary character in the Dance of the Dragons period. My best guess is that the spin-off about his voyages will serve as general introduction to the world outside of Westeros and Eastern Essos. I wonder, what are in-world reasons of choosing a black actor for this role? Is this just because Corlys' mother was from the Summer Islands, or maybe Valyrian society was multiracial and only dragon-riding families were obsessed about blood purity and Valyrian features? I don't know what the in-world, in all honesty, what the in-world reason is. They've not told us what the in-world reason is. I think that the real reason is that Steve Toussaint is a good actor, and so they've gone with that. It's probably worth just noting that George R.R. Martin has said that if he could go back and do this again, he would change the Valyrian features so that they were darker skinned. So this is kind of fitting in with his earlier conception or his later conception of what he should have done for the Valyrians. So I think that's probably what it is. What in-world reason they give, I don't know. I think that they'll probably say that House Velaryon in the TV show world are back, and I think that that's absolutely fine. I don't think there's nothing to say that House Velaryon have to have fair skin. The distinguishing features are the white gold hair and the blue purple eyes, and those, if they're both still there, then those are the Targaryen features sorted. Nat Westwood, what house would Eric Ten Hag be in? Well, I'm hoping he'll be in House Winner, but we will see. Let's quickly try and go through a few questions in the chat. Eric Og saying, just swinging by to say, love you guys. It's a draft night here in the States, so I'm watching that tonight. I assume that's like an American football thing. Andrew Kay saying it all worked out quite well for Rhaenyra and Daemon especially. Laena's death, Laenor and Harwin all dying so close together. All pure coincidence, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. A complete coincidence. Matt Savino saying, what is one of the 9 voyages you find the most interesting? Mine is his endeavor in Leng. So yeah, this is, well, we don't get the huge amounts of detail. This is the fascinating thing about these voyages. As I say, we know the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 9th. The 9th seems basically to go to a shy, get huge amounts of sellable stuff, and come back home. That seems reasonably straightforward. The 2nd seems to be going to a shy. The 1st does seem to go to Leng, which will be fascinating. The 3rd going up to the sort of the north, the Shivering Seas. I would agree. I would love. There are some parts of this world that we see a little bit in the World of Ice and Fire, but we don't get a huge amount about. So I'm sure that he went to the Summer Isles. I'm sure he went to Sothorios. I would love to see them. That would be absolutely fantastic. If we get this TV show, if it goes to a shy, that will be so good. I would be absolutely blown away. I would love to see a shy brought to life on the screen. Leng, similarly, I think we will see Yi Ti in one of the animated shows. I think that's something that they've got working on. Leng would be the island of Leng would be an amazing thing to see. I don't know, but I would love the idea that he sailed west at one point, and that would be fascinating. Whether he found anything going west, I do not know, but 3 of his 9 voyages were along the south coast of Essos. One of them was along the north coast of Essos. The other ones surely have to be a little bit different. So Thorios, yes. Summer Isles, yes. Maybe Westwood. That would be what I would love to see. Cole Carsnock, thank you very much. Just giving a shout out for my 2nd channel. For those who do not know, my 2nd channel is The World Told. I'll try and say that properly. The World Told Tale. Do go and check that out if you love audio books, audio narration. What I'm trying to do is just share the greatest science fiction and fantasy stories ever written with as many people as I possibly can. Always will be completely free on YouTube, on a podcast. No adverts while I'm doing the story, so it doesn't break up the flow of the story. And I'm trying to cover all of the greatest stories from that are foundational to what we know. The H.P. Lovecraft, Conan, the War of the Worlds, Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, just so many of these just absolutely classic stories. I've done The Picture of Dorian Gray. I've got some great stories planned for the next 6 months. We'll go back to some Philip K. Dick. We'll have some Jules Verne. Just trying to think of the things I've got lined up. A bit more Conan. I've got some fantastic stuff lined up for the next 6 months. If you are at all interested in that, please do go and check out The Well Told Tale. There will be a link somewhere down in the description, or if you're watching live in the chat. And while I'm doing my thank yous and things, Patrons, thank you so much. I can't do what I do without your support. This is why I prioritize patrons' questions for this. It's one of my ways of thanking my patrons. If you want to support this channel, or if you want access to some patron benefits, Patreon is the best place to go. There's a link down in the description. So thank you. Let's. I've got. I think just. One more question from my patrons. This may well be another one of the shorter live streams, which is all well and good with me. It gets me to bed nice and early. But if you keep on asking me questions, I will definitely keep on going. Question from Kaios Ballerina. Mark Shisa, was it Corlys who found the ship of Alyssa Farman in the east? Yes. So when Corlys Velaryon, this is his second journey, he goes as far as Ashai. When he returns, he says he saw a ship that looked like the Sun Chaser, which is this ship that Alyssa Farman had. Now, this is important. So Alyssa Farman was a great character that we really get to understand a whole lot more in Fire and Blood. So she runs off with 3 Targaryen dragon eggs. She heads off to Braavos, and she sells them. She sells them to the Sea Lord in exchange for the best ship that she possibly could get, a ship which could sail west and keep going and keep going and keep going. And that's what she gets. The Targaryens, this is during the reign of Jaehaerys, obviously don't want the dragon eggs going anywhere, so they're up in arms about this, but she stays one step ahead of them. She gets into the boat, she heads out, she heads west, she stops off at Old Town just long enough to have a couple of other ships join her. They head off in this great adventure. She just wants to go and explore, see what is west over the horizon. We have this great western sea, nobody knows what's on the far side of it. Those 2 ships have to turn back, the other 2 ships, but her ship carries on, and it's never seen from again. Does she succeed? Does she find out what's west of the Sunset Sea? We do not know, but we know that Planetos is a planet. It is round, so theoretically, you go west, you will end up east. And the idea that many years later, Corlys Velaryon, on reaching Essos, which is almost as far east as the maps extend in Essos. Essos does go further east, but that's about as far as the Westerosi maps extend. If her ship was there, that clearly implies that she sailed west, kept on sailing west, and made it all the way around. So when we think of the Westerosi equivalent of the great circumnavigators of our world, yes, Corlys Velaryon may well have been a great seafarer, but she was the first and the greatest in terms of Westeros. So yeah, this is a fantastic story. That's all the end of that bit to do with those 3 dragon eggs is that basically Jaehaerys tried to get them back, and he tried to threaten to start with, and then he eventually came to some deal with getting a whole load of money from the Braavosi. The Braavosi basically bought them in the end, and Jaehaerys came to the conclusion, you know what, if they hatch, then we'll do something, but let's hope they don't. And they didn't. And almost certainly those 3 dragon eggs that were in Braavos were the 3 that Dany ends up getting in a Game of Thrones and end up hatching. So that's why that's important. These are the ones that Alyssa Farman took all that time ago. I did a video on that if you're interested, if you want the whole background on that one. Yeah, do go and check that out. Reflective Rambling, question from Matt Savino. What did Corlys have to do with the death of Aegon II, if anything at all? Okay, interesting. So Aegon at the end of the Dance of the Dragons, Aegon II was on the throne. Aegon was the Green candidate. Basically, the Greens won at that moment. The Greens got their person on the throne, and he was not in the mood for peace. The entire nation, the continent, had been ravaged by war, and the cooler heads around him said, "This is now time just to, okay, mend a few bridges, put out a few olive branches, just let everybody relax and say, let's just move on from this." Aegon II had been ruined by war. He mentally, physically, everything about him had just been completely just burned and broken by war, and he was not going to have peace. And so he started just refusing all of these very reasonable offers to go out to the warring, those big houses who were still technically at war. That people like Corlys, people like LIvestream wanted to send ravens out and say, let's just, if you surrender, if you accept the new rule, then we'll just forget everything and just try and get back to some semblance of peace. Aegon II was having none of it. He was making sure that the small folk were still being taxed terribly, and he was turning into or running the threat of keeping the war just dragging on. And then he died. He was poisoned. Was he poisoned about it? He was poisoned. Somebody poisoned him. Who poisoned him? Well, it seems pretty clear that it was LIvestream and Corlys Velaryon between them who decided that this is what had to happen. Who ultimately did it? It doesn't really matter so much. These were the two most important and powerful people left in King's Landing at the time, and they wanted peace. They killed him. So what did Corlys have to do with it? Everything. He was behind it. He would have been killed when we get Cregan Stark coming down and we get the Hour of the Wolf. Corlys probably should have been killed, but for the intervention of Alice Blackwood, who just basically said, just forgive him, just let him go. This is for the best. We need peace. So was he anything to do with it? Yeah, I think he was behind it. For Darius Betha, this is Cloaked One picking up for Darius Bethia. Did the Sea Snake know who killed Aegon II? Was it him? One of the greatest mysteries in the Dance of the Dragons. So those two seem to be very similar. Hopefully I answered that one in the same time. Kais Ballerina, who had the best plan to end the war, Corlys or Cregan? I think Corlys, which is what they went with. So Cregan Stark, the Hour of the Wolf is a fascinating part of at the end of this story, the end of the Dance of the Dragons, because right at the beginning, then we get the Team Black send their guy, Jacaerys goes up there, strike a deal and say, House Stark, come and help us. And Cregan Stark says, yes, I'm going to come and do it. It'll take a while, though. It's coming into winter. It's pretty hard going. I have to gather all the people. Then I have to march them all down south. So it will take a while. Fine. And that wasn't a lie. By the time they got there, the war was pretty much over. And all they had to do was just sort of roll into King's Landing and deal with what happens next. And Cregan Stark, for a short period of time, was the most powerful person in Westeros. He just bossed the situation. He, however, was of the opinion that the way that you get peace is by completely eliminating all possible opponents. He was ready to march his force out and attack the remnants of House Hightower, House Lannister, anyone really who was still opposing. That was his thought. And the reasoning behind that was as much the thought that he thought that was the way that you get peace, but it was also the people who'd come down with him, the men from the north who'd come down, they didn't come down expecting to return. The north, during a heavy winter in the north, there were always some people who just basically sacrificed themselves so that others could live. There was a certain amount of food to get through the winter. If you looked around and thought, you know what, there's enough for those people, but not me, you would often sort of go off and sacrifice yourself. And so Cregan basically took all of the people who were going to sacrifice themselves and went down south. They were not expecting to return to the north. They could not, because it was still winter. And if they did, then they would be threatening the lives of others. So they might as well go off and die in glory in battle. So that was part of what he was thinking. You can go off and we can do this the right way. It doesn't matter if people die. Corlys, his idea was basically to say, let's just forgive everyone. Let's just say we've got an entirely new generation here. Pretty much all of the people who had been in charge at the beginning of the dance were no longer in charge. Let's just forgive, forget, move on. Build a new world where we have intermarriages between the two sides. We try and mend some fences. That was his idea. Ultimately, that was what happened, partly because Cregan got talked down by Alice Blackwood, and partly because Corlys had rather cleverly sent out all the ravens with his plan just before Cregan arrived. So by the time Cregan was thinking about heading out, suddenly in came these ravens from all of these places, from Casterly Rock, from Old Town, saying, yep, we agree to what you suggest. And that put him in a situation where it was very hard for him then to go to war with people who'd basically accepted peace already. Reflective Rambling, inspired by Mark Sheeser. What could Corlys have accomplished if he had a ship made by Círdan? Well, he would have headed west and found what was beyond the horizon. Bit of a crossover here between, for those who don't know, between the Song of Ice and Fire and the world of Tolkien. Círdan was called Círdan the Shipwright. He was the person who made the boats who took the elves off to the Undying Lands, and initially that was just a matter of them sailing west because they were just going literally to the continent on the far side of the ocean. But the way that Tolkien's world started out as a flat disk, and then curved it around into a planet later on, and it was called the Straight Road, the Straight Path, because the Undying Lands were taken out of this world to somewhere else. And whereas the Straight Path initially headed off across the sea to the other continent, when the world curved, that Straight Path went off. But still, even though it wasn't going around the world, it was ending up at the Undying Lands. So he could have certainly reached the far side of Essos. Fun question, thank you. Let's have another question from Caius Ballerina. Does having a black actor for Laenor and a white actor for Harwin mean there will be no ambiguity on the parentage of Rhaenyra's children? I think the thing is that in the books there isn't really ambiguity. This is the point, is that it was a joke. It was literally a joke, the fact that it wasn't just that they look a little bit like, it was they completely did not look like Laenor and they completely looked like Harwin. That was the point. So the ethnicity of the actors playing this does not really matter. The important point is that the the children should look like the actor playing Harwin Strong. That's the critical moment we've got going on here. So the ethnicity of whoever's playing the Velaryons is actually less important than whether the children look like their true father. I mean, when I say truth, that almost certainly is. The way that Fire and Blood is written, there's not really much doubt at all about this. They were Harwin's children, and so it's not a matter of, well, okay, well, maybe they are. Who can tell? They clearly are. They clearly are Harwin's children. AK Channel TV saying, long time no see. Hi there. Do you think most viewers will be Team Black or Green? Do you foresee any changes in allegiance for the viewers? Well, one thing I have noticed over the course of the last year or so, as we've been slowly building up to House of the Dragon, is that of the people who have read the book, the vast majority, not everyone, but the vast majority are either Team Black or more interested in the characters on the black side of this equation. There are very few people who claim to be more interested in the High Towers or anyone on that side. So I think that probably that will be where we are going to come into this, particularly given the fact that it does very clearly look from the side of sort of general justice, is that the king said, there's my heir, and then somebody else launched a coup. So our natural instinct is to go and support Team Black. What will be interesting is the extent to which, I don't know whether this will change anyone's thoughts as they go along. Characters like Daemon Targaryen, they are fascinating, they're charismatic, they are interesting, but they're not nice people. Otto Hightower, a large part of the reason why Otto Hightower was behind this coup was because he genuinely thought it would be bad if Daemon got anywhere near the throne. He saw him as being like Maegor the Cruel. He thought that this is a man who is really mad, bad, and dangerous to know. This is the kind of person you do not want to have anywhere near power. If they include that and show him, and later on, some of how Rhaenyra certainly was acting when she was on the throne, Lord Celtigar when he was there in King's Landing, some of this is not good. And I think if they are showing this, then we will probably find that we get a lot more mixed feelings. George R. R. Martin, the way I think George R. R. Martin writes this and will want this to come across to viewers is in the same way that in A Song of Ice and Fire, you may start out sympathizing with a particular house in Westeros, but by the end of it, you just think, you know what? This war just has to stop. This is just the whole thing. It's just the people who are suffering are the small folk. The people who are suffering are the people who cannot look after themselves. It doesn't matter who's in the right and who's in the wrong. What matters is we have to stop this war. I think that is where people are going to get, rather than starting off being Team Black and later thinking, oh, you know what, Team Green had a point. I think people may well start off being Team Black and end up at the point where actually, you know what, we just need to stop this war because it is horrific. Let's go. I had another reflective rambling. Thank you very much. Picking up for Callie Summers. Could the Corlys show give us a chance to see anything inland? Five Forts, Jogos Nye, or further around Essos like Yi Ti? I think certainly we can. So we could certainly see Yi Ti. Whether it will allow us to see things inland, I don't know, quite possibly. I certainly see this as a bit like Sinbad, a kind of a classic Sinbad kind of thing, is that he heads off and he has adventures in places. And the adventures will not just be on the high seas. The adventures will sometimes be he landed somewhere, he explored, he found something. So I think, yes, he may well end up going inland in certain places, certainly exploring an area. Will we get to see things? The Five Forts is quite a long way inland, so maybe we won't see that. But certainly we could see the Jogos Nai, we could see Yi Ti, we could see Leng, those kinds of things. We may well see stuff that's inland. And in fact, I hope so. I mean, the thing is with 9 voyages, kind of sets it up for 9 seasons, and I don't know whether that's the way that they're going to do this, but I like the idea of it, and each one of them could have a kind of a feel to it where, you know, he's trying to achieve a thing, go somewhere, do something. And if they were to keep it going for 9 seasons, they would have to mix it up a bit and not just be on the high seas all the time. EJ Smith, thank you very much for the super chat. Didn't see a question attached to that one, but thank you. Chaos Ballerina, picking up for reflective rambling. Thank you very much. As someone who was prosperous already and keen on adventures, traveling, and the implications of his heart already being lost, what was Corlys's motivation to marry in the first place? Well, maybe it was love. I don't know. We're not told the details of this, but it was a good match for House Velaryon. It's fair to say. If there was one person you, as House Velaryon, you would wish to marry, that would be it. So, what would be his motivation? If he were ambitious for his house, which seems likely, then it would be to get his house close to the Iron Throne in some way. Now, this is borne out by his actions later, it has to be said. So he is clearly very keen to get, if not Rhaenys, then his children with Rhaenys onto the Iron Throne. He spends a lot of money. When we get to this Great Council, Jaehaerys' Great Council in 101, and he and Rhaenys turn up, pushing the case for her children, and he splashes the cash. He spends a lot of money, we're told. He gives a lot of bribes, gifts to people. He is taking this seriously. He is working the room, trying to get people on. He wants this. It's not just something where he goes, yeah, you know, well, whatever. If we're not there, then we miss out. Fine. He definitely and desperately wants to get his wife, his children, his family into King's Landing, onto the Iron Throne. When the way he sees it, snubbed again, he flounces off from King's Landing. He leaves. He goes off. He launches an adventure with Daemon, invading the Stepstones. He does lots of things. Everything he is about seems to imply that he is personally ambitious, not for himself necessarily, but for his family to be on the Iron Throne. So maybe love, but also definitely, I think, ambition. Question from Chaos Ballerina. Picking up for Jesse Sturgeon. Thank you very much, by the way, picking up questions for other people. What do you think of Preston Jacobs' recent video speculating that Corlys Velaryon was preparing for war, bringing elephants over and building ships at Hull? Well, I haven't seen Preston's latest video, so I can't really comment on that. The building ships at Hull, bringing elephants over. It wasn't just elephants. He wasn't bringing a whole load of elephants over to declare war. He was bringing things over that he could make his place, his family rich. Was he potentially preparing for war? Well, he was trying to build up his family to be in a strong position. I don't think that means that he was, and there's never really much of an indication that he was ever actively preparing for war. I mean, he was certainly wishing to be the preeminent sea power and retain that. I don't think he was ever building to a position where he was going to be the preeminent land power. The army of House Velaryon is never mentioned, really. Yes, they had some troops, but it's sea power was what they were about, and it was about their alliance with House Targaryen. So his attempt to gain power was through politics and marriage and being rich and having a great sea force, rather than thinking, you know what, I'm going to be invading this entire continent with some elephants. But I've not seen the video, so I don't know the argument for it. But that's my basic take on what Corlys's plan was. Kartik Prabhu saying, no question, was just told to keep you awake. Well, thank you very much. I am still awake. Question from Reflective Rambling saying, EJ Smith just wanted to let you know you're the best. Thank you. Chaos Ballerina. Andrew K saying, a rich older man matched up with a young and beautiful dragon riding princess who by all accounts was a good person as well. I could see the appeal for him and his family. Yeah, she was 20 years younger than him as well. It's probably worth noting. Caius Ballerina saying, if he wanted them on the throne so much, why didn't he complain about the illegitimacy of his grandkids? I mean, I don't think if he wanted them on the throne so much, he wanted his family on the throne. He wanted his family to be in power. So I don't know. Why didn't he complain about the illegitimacy? I think they just looked the other way. And if he got onto the Iron Throne, or if his family got onto the Iron Throne with people who technically weren't his family, but they thought they were, then I think that would probably work for him. Question from Cloaked One. No question. Just wanted to shout out MVP Caius Ballerina for going above and beyond with the super chats. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Caius Ballerina. I hugely appreciate it. Reflective Rambling saying you forgot the wink on Andrew's message. I'm disappointed. I hope that works for you. Let's go to this, but my last question from my patrons, but I will happily answer as many more questions from the chat as I get. This is Catherine Furseth. So now's a good time to drop any more questions down in the chat. Catherine Furseth. Hi, Robert. Can you give us a bit of the backstory with regards to House Velaryon coming to Westeros in the first place? Why did they leave Valyria? Even the Targaryens were a second-tier family in Old Valyria. What do we know of the Velaryons? And once in Westeros, was seamanship and trade the base of their wealth? How did other Westerosi houses view them up till Aegon's conquest, when they became prominent in politics? Okay, so first of all, let's cover Valyrian society. So there appear to have been three, there may have been more, we've not had a detailed breakdown, but there appear to have been at least three different castes or groups within Valyrian society. The top group, the top 40 houses, the Dragon Riders, they were the most important. Below them also, Valyrians were a secondary group. This is where House Velaryon were, and below them were everyone else. They had slaves at the very bottom. Now, the Targaryens were in that top group of 40, but they were not one of the most powerful. but because they were dragon riders, they were sort of a tier above the Velaryons. So what, in terms of backstory of why House Velaryon were there, we don't really have it. What we know is that the Valyrian freehold, the Valyrian Empire, effectively was slowly expanding out, but there was this reticence, there was this nervousness, this superstition about Westeros, because there was a prophecy that Lannister gold would be the downfall of the Valyrian freehold. So they never really went to Westeros, but they pushed as far as they could. Now, it was important for the politically, economically important to have some degree of control over the narrow sea. And so the Valyrian freehold seems to have started to buy up those islands that were there or buy up or conquer. We don't know the details of it. Those islands that there are in the mouth of the gullet. So we get Claw Island, we get Driftmark, we get Dragonstone. And the House Velaryon were on Driftmark early on. They were there before the Targaryens arrived over on Dragonstone, and they were basically the westernmost outpost of the Valyrian freehold. Why were they there? We're not told. Maybe because they were seafarers and they actually liked being out on an island and spending most of their time on boats. Maybe they actively wanted to go out there and do that kind of stuff. We don't know. Maybe there was a reason why they wanted to leave Valyria. Again, we don't know. But they were there, and they were there for a while. But although there was clearly trading links across with the eastern bit there of Westeros, particularly places like Duskendale, which was quite an important port before King's Landing started growing, that their interaction with the rest of Westeros was limited. People knew of them, and they clearly respected them, and they had a big navy, but as long as they stayed where they were and didn't try and take over any of Westeros, it seems that most of the lords there just kind of let them be. So that was the situation with them before they got there. You were asking whether, before the Targaryens arrived, whether seamanship and trade was the basis of their wealth. Yes, very much so. So before Corlys Velaryon, they were a reasonably rich house, it would appear. They were well-to-do. Because they were connected in with the Targaryens, that was what gave them as much of their power, but also they had the ships. After Corlys, and it's worth pointing out that it's not just that he went and brought a whole load of money back. He brought a whole load of money back, and then immediately stimulated the local economy. He built a new town. He got the shipwrights building new things. This created jobs, created employment. It created Spice Town, which was the go-to place that people wanted to come in. Ships stopped there rather than going all the way into Duskendale or King's Landing or wherever. They got the docking fees there. It created extra income. Obviously, when the sailors and the captains came aboard, they'd be spending their money. This was good for the local economy. It created quite a boom over on Driftmark, and that was the source of their wealth. So they were important. What happened during the Dance of the Dragon, and this is why during Game of Thrones we don't see them so much, is that during the Dance of the Dragons, the Battle of the Gullet happens, and the Velaryons lose a lot of their ships, but more importantly, when the Triarchy's fleet heads back, they stop off and they just burn Spice Town to the ground. And they raid it, and they take away all of the goods, and all of the good work that Corlys Velaryon had done to build that up, create this booming economy, just gone. It's just vanished. That meant the Driftmark was still a strategically important place, but its brief moment of being that important had passed. Cloaked One picking up for C. McBroom. What, if anything, do you think Orain Waters is trying to emulate from Corlys in the current story? So Orain Waters is an interesting character. He's a book-only character. He's there appointed. He's master of ships. He is a Velaryon bastard, effectively, and he kind of heads off. So whether he's trying to emulate Corlys is, I don't think he is, basically. But Cersei will definitely be, to a degree, emulating Rhaenyra's rule. I think Rhaenyra's rule in King's Landing. It's going to be short and it's going to be horrific, and eventually she's going to be hounded out. I think that's what's going to happen. And Orain Waters, to a degree, is therefore going to be echoing what happened with Corlys Velaryon, which is that he was in charge of the Navy, but she's going to turn on him. He has fled, by the way, and that's what it is. He will probably go. There are rumors that he has gone to the Stepstones and is trying to set himself up with a little empire in the Stepstones. That's a bit like what Corlys did. Corlys did it with Daemon Targaryen, and they captured all but 2 of the Stepstones Islands, and Corlys crowned Daemon the king of the Stepstone. I can't remember what it was, king of the Narrow Sea and the Stepstones, or something along those lines. So there is an echo there, I think, with Orain Waters. But the point, I think, with him is what happens when Daenerys and her massive fleet comes through and the dragons arrive through. Will he try to stop them, or will he just get out of the way? And will he join them? That's the crucial thing, I think, when it comes to Orain Waters. Cloaked One picking up for Callie Summers, saying, "What somewhat off topic, but is there a story in Planetos that you think would be well suited to a movie or trilogy rather than a full series? The Doom of Valyria, Mother Mole, Robert's Rebellion, movie or trilogy?" This is quite interesting. I think well, perhaps the regency of Aegon III. Now, the more I read Fire and Blood, the more fascinated I am by this period. It's almost certainly not going to be covered in House of the Dragon, and it's almost certainly not going to be picked up in any of the other things they've got going on. But it is a fascinating period because it's the shift from the end of the Dance of the Dragons to the new Targaryen rule. But there's a period where basically the Targaryens aren't really in control. There's a regency. There's some hugely powerful figures like Lord Peake. There's Grand Maester Munken, who is one of the most suspicious characters in the entire Fire and Blood. There's what happened to the dragons. Why did they suddenly start dying out? There's a whole load of issues with Alice Rivers going on. There's what all of the regents dying out, being replaced. There's Sandok the Shadow. There's a huge amount of the Lysine Spring. There's a huge amount of fascinating bits in there that just bridge this period from the end of the Dance of the Dragons to let's get back to the new normal being Targaryens ruling, but this time without the dragons. This is the bridge period, and that, I think, a trilogy would probably work quite well to cover it as a subject, but there's so much there that is sort of left unsaid. And there's I said Munken was hugely suspicious. There's a period, I'm sure I've said this before, but I think it's worth pointing out. There's a period when Grand Maester Munken, for about 6 months, maybe 9 months, is probably the most powerful person Westeros has ever seen at any point in Westeros's history. And I mean by that the fact that the king, Aegon III, has taken a complete step back. He's not involved in anything. Munchen is the regent, so he's acting on behalf of the king. Added to which, he's also hand of the king, so there's not a hand. He's doing all of that stuff. There's not a small council, so there's nobody calling him to account. If you look at all of the big houses at the time, they're all distracted. The Starks are distracted by there being a winter that they have to deal with. Alan Velaryon is off sailing around the seas, taking on the House Greyjoy. The Lannisters are trying to defend themselves against the Greyjoys. The Tyrells, they've just got a child there as their lord at the time. The Arryns have got a civil war going on. All of the major houses have got other things that there's nobody's paying any attention. Added to which, you get Munchen, as well as being regent, as well as being hand of the king, as well as being the entire small council, is the head of the maesters and is therefore the head of the communications network, the head of educating the nobility of the land. He is the most powerful. The power is just in on this one person. And what does he do with that? He doesn't want to say. He doesn't want to tell anyone what happened in that time. So suspect. It's a fascinating period. But I would love to know a little bit more about that. Let's go to, I think I had a couple more questions here. So Cloaked One picking up for reflective rambling, but really for me, as a fellow cloak connoisseur, who during the dance do you think would have the best cloak? Oh, who would have the best cloak? Well, I think we get one cloak which is mentioned as being particularly cool, which is Miseria, Lady Misery. She wears a fan, and they've done a great cloak actually with one of the photos that we've had, the official photos of her. She's wearing a fantastic looking cloak. The as it's described, I think it was black with the red insides, and it just she wore it well, is what we're basically told. Who else would have a good cloak? Well, I think all of the Velaryons probably would, in a kind of like a seaman way. You can just imagine them sort of like that, with the cloak billowing out behind them as their ship sails off. But I don't know who else would wear a good cloak. A showman like Daemon probably would as well. But I will say the best cloak wearer will be Lady Misery. Roman Lakovets, the show Sea Snake and the 10,000 Ships are both about sailors. Is there really an audience for two shows with such a similar premise? Well, I have thought this, but I think that they will have different feels. This is one of the things. George R. R. Martin obviously can't say huge amounts yet about the shows, largely because they haven't been commissioned yet. The HBO have not yet given a green light to anything except for House of the Dragon. But what he has said is that they've got different feels to them. So they're in slightly different, he doesn't use the word genres, but that's the kind of the way he describes it. So some of them might be more dark and horror related, some of them might be lighter, some of them might be more adventure, some of them might be more politicky. So that's the kind of feel that he's got. And in that light, I think that they could very much set these as being different feels. So the 9 voyages, I've said Sinbad, this is the way that I would personally see this. This is adventure, this is exploring, this is discovering new things, quests, fun stuff like that. That is how that feels to me. The Nymeria story is about a displaced people trying to find a home, and certainly for the first season or so, they're not even at sea. They might be a river-based culture, but the reason, I think they should show the reason why they're landless, why they are leaving because of the war with Valyria. And then it's can they settle one place or two places? They could just have a couple of seasons. So I mean, if I were doing this, I'm going off on one now, but if I were to do that show, it would be a whole season of the build up to them leaving. Then we have maybe a couple of seasons of them trying different places, Sathorios, Sunset Islands, wherever, before the landing in Dawn, and then you could have a couple of seasons of establishing themselves in Dawn and becoming part of the ruling family there. So this is not about exploration. This is about trying to find a home. And that would, if anything, that would be more of a Battlestar Galactica kind of feel. That would be how I would go for it. This ragtag navy kind of idea, rather than let's go out and try and find some gold and some treasure and some fun. Matt Savino saying, do you think we may get some exposition from Corlys about his voyages, possibly a few tidbits about them in conversation? In House of the Dragon, yeah, I think we will. I think we might get a few. When they're establishing the character, at the very least, when they're establishing the character, they have to show us who he is. And as I say, at the start of the Dance of the Dragons, if we're to understand who this character is, he is a 73-year-old legend who is, and I always try and remember what his exact phrase is, but he feels like he's clinging on to life, like a sailor holding on to some planks of wood in the sea for dear life. That's how he's feeling, and he wonders whether he has been spared this long for this one last battle. That's the feel that we've got when he walks into a room. People should just stop and stare at this man who is there because of all the legends that swirl around him. And that will require some degree of people talking, not so much him maybe talking about where he's been, but people talking about him, people noting and quite everything that he's been through, which will help us understand him as a character. They probably won't be able to resist a few little bits of making sure that the audience are aware of quite how exciting his voyages were, just in case that other spin-off show does happen, in which case people then excited for it. It's not just book readers who know about this. Okay, I think that is me caught up on Patreon. I will do a last few questions, so let's quickly flick through the chat. So Cole Karsnock saying, Robert the dutiful teacher, and we're the bratty class that snickers every time says but instead of however. He said but, he said seaman. It really is funny. Okay. You are very naughty school children, if that's what works for you. Reflective Ramblings saying, clearly when these sailing shows come to us, Deep Geek needs to get J-Dead Redhead on these shows, who is a legit shipwright. I did not know that. Very impressive. Andrew Kay talking about tentative times right now. Have to see how House of the Dragon does, and I suspect numerous of these potential shows will not all be made. Yeah, I think it's fair to say if it's a hit, then if House of the Dragon is a hit, then they will definitely commission quite a few of these. Whether they're going to go with quite the same approach that Disney did. If you remember when Mandalorian at the end, I think it was at the end of Mandalorian season 2, they realized that was massive. They just suddenly announced, and here's 10 other shows we're going to do. And it was like, here's the Boba Fett show. Here's going to be the Skywalker show, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, here's going to be this, here's going to be that, here's going to be the Bad Batch, and they just announced all of these other random shows that were going to be happening. I don't know whether they're going quite will go that far, HBO, but I certainly expect if we get to the end of that season, if it's a success, firstly, they will announce season 2 being commissioned. And secondly, I think they will at very least greenlight some what they called. You know what I mean? Just a one-off, just to test out whether it works for a few of the other shows. I think probably they will greenlight some of the animes a lot quicker than the other ones, but who knows? It's if this is not a success, if House of the Dragon is not a success, then they probably won't throw huge amounts of extra cash at lots of other things, but maybe they will consider if Game of Thrones really is the cash cow that they thought it was. Okay, so I think with that, got another question. Jewel Elson saying, Curse Ballerina, real question is, will we see elephants? Will we see elephant if we get not in House of the Dragon? If we get to the 9 Voyages TV show, and if the 9 Voyages TV show gets to voyage number 9, yes, I am humbly confident that we will see dragons, because there are very few bits of information we actually have about the voyages. So where we do get bits of information, I'm sure they will use them. So this is because otherwise it's just a completely made up thing, which is fine. You can completely make stuff up, but it's like, if what we know about voyage number 9 is he went to Ashai, he bought 20 ships, on some of them he put elephants, and they don't do elephants, and it's not 20 ships, then you go, well, you know, what's the point? Why are you pretending that this is there? I'm sure they will. I'm absolutely convinced of it. Okay, so a reminder, next week I will not be here for Hush Hush Secret reasons. I will tell you more in 2 weeks. But in 2 weeks' time, I will be back with a Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power live stream, hopefully with a guest on, somebody that you've not heard from before, perhaps, but somebody who is excellent. Okay, if you're watching back later, you will find somewhere around here will be appearing a link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here will be appearing a link to Patreon, which is the best way to support this channel if you so wish. That's all for this time. Take care, everyone. There'll be more videos coming from me over the course of the next couple of weeks, so I'm not going to disappear, but I will see you in 2 weeks' time. Take care. I will see you again soon.